Today's guest is someone I've been excited to bring you ever since our very first conversation, the incredible Heidi Ram. Heidi is a partner at The Product Recruiter, a boutique firm that works with companies across North America and Europe to place senior-level product leaders. When companies are facing a strategic turning point, whether it's solving a broken product experience, launching something entirely new, or finally going after a long-awaited product opportunity, they often realize they can't do it alone. That's where someone like Heidi steps in. What I love about this conversation is how Heidi cuts through the noise. We talk about when it actually makes sense to work with a recruiter and why hiring managers are doubling down on domain expertise like never before. Plus, what to do if you want to break into a new domain and you don't have that experience yet. We explore how product careers are built over time through repetition, pattern recognition, and grit. Heidi shares how she evaluates candidates not just on skills, but on stickability, the ability to commit to something hard, stay long enough to see it through, and ship with purpose. We also talk about what it takes to become a great manager in product. And spoiler, you can't leave the maker self behind. The best product leaders are still builders at heart. Heidi reveals why reaching out to hiring managers in their work email, not just DMs on LinkedIn, is a game-changing strategy, and we unpack how to write a resume that actually tells a story, one that shows how to build a business, not features. There's wisdom in every minute of this episode, especially if you're navigating a job search, thinking about your next move, or trying to understand what employers are really looking for right now. Let's get into it. Heidi, it's great to be with you today. You're such an energizing person, and I loved meeting you a few months ago when we were talking about my career. I wanted to talk to you today about the product management career, the things that you see and the things that you seek as a recruiter. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself as a way of introduction?
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me today. There's nothing I love talking about more than product careers and the complexity and the nuance across the whole function of product. I am a product recruiter. In fact, I work for a company called The Product Recruiter. How perfect is that? I mean, how could I not work here if that's what the company's called?
Pretty good SEO.
Exactly. I lead our firm's product practice, which means that I spend my time recruiting senior level product talent. So chief product officers, vice presidents, heads of, and we have a whole team of talented recruiters who work on individual contributor roles, both in product management and product design. Our clients are typically B2B SaaS software companies. Sometimes we'll work with consumer experiences, whether apps or wearables or whatever their products are. We are based in Toronto, Canada, but the scope of our work is really global, primarily North America, so Canada and the US. And right now we're also doing quite a bit of work in Western Europe. So the UK, Amsterdam, Berlin. Yeah. Yeah, that's what we do.
Why do you suspect that companies can't do it on their own and they need to turn to a third-party recruiter to make it happen?
Well, that's different company to company. And economies impact that as well. Now, typically in this kind of a market, organizations are still trying to do more with less. So if it's a product owner, junior, whatever that word means, junior, someone who is not a senior, whatever that means, head of principal staff, whatever, most organizations are trying to make the hire themselves. But the moment someone needs to hire someone where it's a direct line to revenue. So let's think about why most organizations hire a product person at any level. It can be boiled down to two reasons. Number one, we have a big problem here. Our product doesn't work. Our competition is crushing us. We don't have a closed loop system where someone can pay in the product. We actually have to send a manual invoice and take a credit card by phone. We've had those searches. Think about any kind of a problem that an employer has. That could unlock a very special product hire, and typically someone who has done that before.
Hmm.
But the other reason an organization typically hires a senior level product person is to realize an opportunity. We've never done this before. We need someone who can figure it out. Take this napkin drawing and realize a product and take it to, we want to commercialize that product. You're going to do that. Think about, we just raised money and now we're going to do all the things we've ever dreamed of. Wow, we just won our largest anchor client. Bank of America is now our client. And so now we want to go after Wells Fargo and Citibank and everyone else. So we need a product person to realize that dream. And so when the hire is senior and strategic, and where there is really defined outcomes this person will be held accountable to achieving, that kind of a hire, the requirements of who that CPO or a founder CEO, who they want to hire, far exceeds, well, we'd like their day-to-day to be like this. We want them to use this kind of an AI tool, right? It's at a business level.
Yeah.
And so the requirements when we are engaged by a CPO or a CEO, those requirements depend entirely on why they need to hire and therefore who they think they need to hire and what must that person have done before. That's the search.
Yeah, that last piece is so critical. And I think that's actually what brought us together in the first place when we first met each other was I was going through that never search alone process.
Yes.
And part of that has you to connect with recruiters and ask them how they perceive you in the market. And we dove right into that. And I was like, Heidi, how do you think I would be perceived in this market? Where do you feel I would be a good fit? And it came down to someone who's in the digital health space. Maybe you'd be matching up with something like that. So that's being a subject matter expert from the eye of the recruiter is everything. That's how you're honing and filtering and looking down into who you're going to find for filling roles.
Yeah, I mean, we are in a time right now where domain expertise is the number one criteria for
Yeah.
most organizations. And I'm very careful that I don't broad brush everything because product is incredibly nuanced and one can never predict what one hiring stakeholder is going to optimize for over another. But the trend right now in this moment is domain expertise. And if we think about why that is, it's because we are in a time where we were betting on futures, everybody was betting on futures. Now we're ingrained in reality. What does that mean? That means that employers want rapid ROI on every hire. And if we think about the CEO as a hiring stakeholder, let's think about the CEO. A CEO typically stays with an organization much longer than anyone else in the company, right? More so if they're the founder CEO. And so
Definitely.
they have lived with the problem set they've been trying to solve for a long time. They are the expert. And so you can imagine that person, that persona, thinks that the only person who's going to be able to do this is someone who also understands this problem set and can help us figure out the things we haven't been able to figure out yet. And so that's a big reason why. And that will change again one day, but right now, that's the narrative.
Yeah, so someone who has demonstrated this grit in being a founder, they have fallen in love with the problem, the space. Naturally, they could be a great fit as a product person at some company.
They could be.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so for people who, you know, and people who may be listening to this, they might find themselves in a position where they want to become a domain expert in something that they're currently not. How do you suggest that they might even go about that kind of change so that they can appeal and catch the eye of people who are looking to fill those future roles that they're trying to get after?
So I'm going to answer that in a different way. So your question is, how might someone become a domain expert in something that they are not?
Hmm.
Well, that's really hard. Um, to go from 0 to 1, to not be an expert to now you're an expert. Okay, so let's reimagine this. Okay. So let's think about first, a career is about building. You are building your career. Okay? And most people, when they're starting off in a product career, the amazing thing about product is that it attracts, there's a wide community who enter product. You don't have to be any one thing to get into product. You might have an engineering background. You might be a marketer. You might be a salesperson. You might be a person working in industry
Hmm.
and build and are able to build a career in product. There is room for you. But the core of being a great product manager, in my humble opinion, is the level of where you are in the journey towards craft, because product management has become a craft. Books are written, web podcasts are created. People follow people with celebrity status to learn the craft of product and how to think about it. So step one is building a career as a product person and then getting really good at doing product and closing the gaps where there are gaps and adding repeatability to what you have done, because to have done it once does not make you a great product person. To have done it once in one economy, it's a career over time where you are learning and failing and improving and scaling your scope, right? All of these things help contribute to someone's career. In the process of that, you will probably find that you will become an expert or close to an expert in the thing that you're working on. And what happens very organically is that someone one day will reach out to you to recruit you. Could be a third party, could be an employer. And you might say yes to an opportunity. And the reason why they might have reached out to you is because you work at their competition, or they're trying to do the very thing that you seem to have been successful in doing for your employer. And so now you're working for the second company who is similar to the first one or the second one, right? And so all of that will over time possibly make you a domain expert in a problem set. One of the big questions that someone will have to answer for themselves eventually is, do I want to keep leaning in to this one industry or problem set, or do I want to do something new and different, which is what most PMs will eventually want to do one day. And so that's a big decision someone wants to make. Is there a right or wrong answer? No. There's power in both. Keep building, 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 going deep, or work on something that you never worked on before and apply those learnings to who you are as a PM.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a couple different angles that someone can be perceived as a good fit or an expert for a role. One would be that they have built this domain expertise in a specific problem space industry. But it also sounds like someone might want to continue pivoting the scope of work that they do, but they might retain the same kind of role. Like they might be someone who's instantiating product at smaller companies every time over and over again. Would you say that it may be true, or to some extent, that you may be seeking product people who are not only just industry and subject matter experts in the problem set, but also someone may become a subject matter expert at doing product at a certain stage of company or a certain time of the company. For example, a product person might be a really good fit to come in and be like product manager number one at an organization. And you might look for that kind of role.
100%. Yeah. And I had mentioned earlier that product is very nuanced. So think about all of the different pieces of a product organization. In a small company, one person might kind of do everything. But the more mature the organization becomes, you're going to have people who exclusively are domain experts in API integrations.
Mhm.
Others are all about PLG, product-led growth motions. Others are payments experts, or the infrastructure, the platform level versus the front end user experience. This is so incredibly nuanced that one could become a domain expert in that piece of how product is done or that part of the product. Absolutely.
You've seen so many different variations and ways that the opportunities can appear. For product people who are earlier on in their career where perhaps they're builders, they're the ones who are doing the tactics. How do these like makers eventually find themselves pursuing a path to become a manager? And how might they even know if like that's a route that they would want to go down?
Well, I'm always fascinated with product managers who really want to be a manager, because product management is that magical function where you can have tremendous influence and impact. You can be so respected and earn a better than average salary by being an individual contributor. You don't have to be a manager, unlike many other functions where, traditionally you're kind of climbing a ladder. And we are in a time where everything is just so about the results and about the product, that the individual contributing PMs, that is the persona employers will always need on their team. They may not necessarily need management. If we think about the market that we're in right now, with all of the downsizings that have happened, which hopefully are behind us now, we have lean teams. And it has really become about, the superstar product manager. That's where we're at today. And when organizations are hiring right now, they're making strategic hires, key hires. They might be bringing one person on this quarter, maybe two. Again, I'm referring to startup scale-ups. I'm not talking about large enterprise. Hiring is very, very targeted, and a leader has fought for budget to make that hire. So the number of leadership roles, manager roles that exist today, they're few. When we think about a product manager thinking about their career, we have to think about, we have to ask the question of ourselves, what is it about management that you think you want to be that and pursue that path? Something to be mindful of if you are pursuing manager level roles in an organization. Employers need to feel good that the maker in you is still burning bright, because the entire reason why an organization hires a manager of a product organization or into a product organization is to build a business, is to do big, hard things. It's to move that team in the right direction so that ultimately what gets shipped in the market is amazing, delightful. People will want to pay for it. People will never churn out of it. You're going to crush and beat and move into that magic quadrant or whatever it is your dreams are. That's actually why a company would hire a manager. So the maker who exists in the manager is needs to be the lens that is being applied to how they manage. Management today is not about sitting in the corner office managing from afar. Managers today are being asked to roll up their sleeves, get hands on, be a player coach. This is the language that a lot of employers use when they think about a group PM, a director of PM, or whatever a manager title might be in a bigger company. They want engaged leaders who inherently are going to be the guardian of what gets shipped and be able to be a part of that journey.
I love that. And it really changes the way that you think about being a maker and becoming a manager. It's more like the maker is at the core. That's the heart of the product person. And the manager grows around that because the maker is still very much the beating heart of that individual.
100%. And for anyone who is a maker who longs and aspires or has pressure from their parents to, aren't you a manager yet? It's important to always be building bridges with your upline, with your leaders, and sharing the dream of who you aspire to become one day. So that one day, when there is budget and there is an opportunity for the company to add a leader to the product team, that they would think of you, not because you want to be a manager, but because you know the business, you understand their customer, they want to retain you, and you've done an incredible job. Isn't that the right reason to be promoted and to become a manager?
Completely. Oh yeah.
Right? And think about how much more successful you are likely to be in that role, and how much more successful the business is going to be because of the history and the knowledge that you have. There doesn't have to be this thing called knowledge transfer and onboarding. You're it. And so this is good for you, because I'll tell you something. For anyone who has never been a leader and romanticizes being a manager. So when I say leader, I'm referring to manager in this context. There's this we romanticize these things, but the art of learning how to do the job with excellence, and the nuance of being the new person, and then discovering how to manage those pieces can be where the friction is, right? Because there's an expectation on a manager when they're hired. You're the manager. So there's an expectation you're going to know how to do these things. Figure it out, manage people, which is all about problems actually, and add value.
You mentioned earlier about product being building this business. You're building a business. And is this something that a lot of PMs fail to really convey and speak to, whether that's in an interview or on their resume? Like, what are some mistakes that they're making in maybe not talking about them building a business?
Well, there are some product managers who have the narrative around business, ARR growth, outcomes, value that they've delivered. There's a lot of really great product managers who do speak like that, and understand that that is a critical part of being a candidate. Okay. And then there's many who aren't. And so flexing that muscle and learning how to communicate according to the role that you are being hired for, that takes time sometimes, and that takes nuance. To be a candidate is a very unnatural experience. And if you're someone who has been employed at organizations for long periods of time, and maybe it was a candidate's market when you got hired 5-7 years ago, and now it's an employer's market, you might be looking, deer in headlights, thinking, wow, I don't know what to do, what to say, how to approach this. That's very normal.
Mhm.
Yeah. I always think about a candidate, and I experience candidates who stand out, who are very attuned to communicating the difference they made. They are able to communicate a before and after story and connect the dots in a very curated way. And that takes some practice and some skill. I always recommend to candidates, jot it down, like actually write down, why were you hired? What was the state of the product then? And look at those words on the page and think about that time. Remember. And then where was it? when you left, or what is it like today? And try to connect those dots with business metrics.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the product function is a business function. And so being able to speak to that is everything.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
There was a video that you had shared with me a couple months ago, and it was one where you were presenting through a bit on the product manager's journey and how they can find their next role. And there were some really interesting strategies and tactics. And among these things that you just mentioned now, another one that really sat with me and it resonates with being memorable is meeting these hiring directors, these product leaders, where they work, which is in their email. So at a time, actually, I was interested in some jobs and I was creating Loom videos and dropping those into product leaders' emails. And I would see when the Loom video would get watched. It was really interesting. I didn't hear back from all of them or any of them, but that's a big part of the journey is meeting them where they are. um, as some strategies and tactics, what is value in doing something like that, and what else can a product person maybe do to be memorable and stand out and plant that seed?
Yeah. Well, the whole thing about engaging with a product leader or a stakeholder where they're at is this idea that business leaders do business in business email. And when you're a candidate, however, you're living in LinkedIn.
Mhm.
And so it's very natural to think that I'm going to send a lot of DMs over LinkedIn, and that's going to create the activity that might result in an interview. But the reality is that LinkedIn, while an incredible platform with a lot of, opportunity to change lives by bringing people together, it has real limitations. And the in-mail part of it is not ideal. Messages get pushed down. A lot of people have their alerts off. So they have to be in the app, in platform to actually see anything. And they're probably only going to see the most recent stuff. And if your message came a couple of weeks ago, well, that's in the abyss and they'll never see it.
Mhm.
But that business leader will always be in business email because that's where their boss is. And that's where investors will message them. And it's a whole thing. So as a candidate, it's always important to, if you're trying to seek engagement with a hiring stakeholder or introduce yourself, that you're doing it through business email. And ChatGPT, will be your best friend if you don't have, if you don't have a subscription to the tools that generate email addresses. GPT can help you get email addresses. And so being on point with that as your channel is important to think about. The other piece to think about, though, is that, everything's become automated. It's so easy to press a button and apply to a posting. But it doesn't mean that while everything is automated, that everything's effective. And so the process of seeking employment by pressing buttons and uploading a resume, we need to understand that's only one channel. It's one leg of a stool.
Mhm.
So the other pieces that need to really be happening simultaneously is, first of all, everyone you've ever worked with or worked for, if you would work for them again, they need to know that you're actually thinking about the future and what might come next.
Yeah.
Because that will be the path for most people. Someone who recognizes you were great, you delivered, value, you'd be a great hire, introducing you into their organization or to someone who they know. So that actually needs to be the number one tactic. But your community, while as wonderful as they are not going to go to sleep at night worrying about you. And that is often an expiry sensitive period of time. They'll remember you when you reach out. They might do a little bit of something, make some intros, but then they're working or they're living their life or they're trying to find employment. So then we have to kick in that second channel, which is postings, okay? Doing that flow, necessary evil. Recruiters are a part of that stool, one of the legs on the stool. But the reality is that most people will never get placed by a recruiter. Why is that? because recruiters are focused on the work for which they have been engaged and retained. And if you're not, if your experience doesn't fit exactly into what they are tasked to find, it just means that right now they don't have a search for you. So my advice is always put your effort into employers versus recruiters, because a recruiter is a headhunter and they'll find you. If your LinkedIn profile is optimized, they'll find you. That's all they do for a living. They're looking for people. But the other piece to this stool that should never be underestimated is engaging with an employer or a stakeholder cold. So we talked about the pressing the buttons, applying, but I also want to talk about that employer engagement, introducing yourself to someone who may or may not have an opportunity, but you're just building your network and you're putting yourself out there, because you never know who is thinking about something that could be helpful for you.
Yeah. And it sounds like in order for a candidate to be able to do that third leg of the stool, to go out and reach and connect directly with employers, there probably needs to be some motivating force that's going to push them towards that company in particular. You might be talking with a product person and maybe they're an interesting fit for a role,
Mhm.
but as you kind of unpack things with them, maybe it sounds like they haven't really figured out what they do want to do next. What kinds of things should a product person do to make sense of that direction that they want to
Okay.
go in?
I love it. I love it. Okay, let's talk about the product person who doesn't know what they want to do next,
Yeah.
or where there's some, they're just not sure. That's my favorite kind of product person to talk with.
You don't
Well,
think it's a waste of 20 minutes of your time?
well, if we have time at the end of this, I'll tell you what's a waste of my time. But let's focus on the product person who doesn't really know what they want to do next. Now, most do. I'm going to tell you that straight up front. Most have quite strong opinions about the situation. So most people will tell me, you know what? I'm done working with first-time founders. I'll work with a founder, but they got to be a multi-time founder, or they got to be an outside CEO or an outside CPO. I'm done with the crazy Heidi. Or someone might say, you know what? I need a company who already has found product market fit, because I don't want to, do that 0 to 1 thing. Been there, done that. They have to have already found product market fit. Then I'm interested. Okay. But the product person who is a blank slate is the best kind, because they're going to lead themselves through a discovery period. And as an individual, let's not even call you a candidate. As an individual, you are limited by your personal experiences for what you know. So if you've only ever worked in a 0 to 1 type of company, you've been the first PM that founders have hired, and you've done that a few times, you don't have the experience of something that might already be a 60 million ARR company, and now they're trying to get to 100 million.
That's a different game.
Okay? And you, if you've only ever been working in, let's say, ed tech, where that's a very different kind of a business, you won't know what it's like to work for a sales tech or a MarTech company where everything is about helping companies make money. We want to close more deals. We want to get more MQLs. You don't know what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
And so the product manager who says, you know what, I just want to work with great people, and I want to get behind something that I really feel I could win in. I want to work on something that when I hear about the problem set, I look at the product, I think, you know what? I can get excited about this. I want to work on this. I've never done this before, and I love the people I met. That can be a very exciting time. The more open you are, the more room there is, and this is going to sound so superficial, but for the magic to happen.
Yeah. It sounds like there's these ingredients of product people having this appetite, having this open-mindedness, and those are the ones who you can just drag and drop into some new problem space, and perhaps they thrive in it and they get energized by it. Or perhaps it's not a good fit and then they just recalibrate and they're still in that discovery phase. In many ways, it shouldn't be discouraging for someone to be in that discovery phase. If anything, it's like a golden opportunity for magic to happen.
And we only know what we know, right? And there's so much out there, and every with every new search that we take on, I'm discovering something that I've not thought of before. Because I could have 3 clients all in MarTech sales tech with those types of products. And this is true. This is a real life story. So 3 companies all with that type of a product, all recruiting their first VP product.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But each one, it's a little bit of a different situation. And the leader, the CEO of each one is completely different, like totally different personalities and how they think about the kind of person who they want to hire. One wants someone who they can kibitz with, really talk shop and, dream together. And the other person, all they care about is, I want to see people who have taken something from single digits to 50 million plus. That's it. I only want to see those people. I don't care about kibitzing.
Uh-huh.
Someone else is much more craft. They want you to be someone who has a Substack with, subscribers, and that you will have been interviewed by someone high profile whose name starts with L, that's who they want. So that's the fun piece about thinking about you as a product person in your career, is that there is the potential for you to work with different kinds of founders and to apply a different way of doing product to so many companies. And while for the employer, they're trying to find who they will want to hire, you as the product person will need to determine what's the right match for me, because you will have to do that job and do it with excellence. And you want stickability, right? You need to think of every opportunity, minimum 2 years, ideally 3.
So a little bit of that retention piece, that's what you mean by stickability, is that you've
Yes.
actually stayed
Yes.
with an organization to make something happen.
You got to make it happen, and you want to see through the results of your decisions and what you ship. Tragedy is I'm meeting a candidate, I'm hear about why they were hired and what they did. And I'll say, okay, so wow, so where are you at? Oh, well, I left before what?
Yeah, why would you
What?
go?
Well, what's the AR? I don't, I don't know. I don't know what the AR is. I guess I could find out.
Yeah.
That's tough. So stickability, seeing it through, being able to have a talk track. And let's face it, people are still asking that classic interview question, right? When did you fail? So describe a time that you failed there and what did you learn from it?
Hmm.
Well, if the going got tough and you were failing and then you bailed, I guess you don't have that talk track. You jumped. There is a time when every product person should not take calls from recruiters or employers.
Time is that.
The time is when you are in the midst of it and you haven't yet shipped and you don't yet have the results. You need to be able to have the talk track, because that's what makes you the more valuable individual. That's really what someone wants from you and why they will hire you. And that's the power, that's everything. And it's going to be hard everywhere. There will be moments when you will realize in many situations, wow, well, they didn't tell me that. And oh, we actually have resource constraints. I didn't think we would. Oh, well, you know what? It's a sales-led business. I didn't think to talk to a customer.
Yikes.
And now I've discovered what our customers actually think. So it's going to be hard. And so you always want to think back. You always want to think to the point that When you exit, you can speak to the reason why you were hired, that you worked and did that hard thing, and that you are leaving them better than when you joined, and that, like, no regrets, right? There's no regrets. And that you worked with the business and your stakeholders on all those problems and things that came up that you didn't know about to build that business, because that's really why you're there. And the reason why you'll be hired to do that again. So you better get used to it. And when we think about the employer in that difficult situation, they chose you. So you're accepting an offer, but before they ever met you, before you ever met them, they might have met with 4, 5, 20, 50, 150 people before they chose you. That's how special you are.
Yeah, if that doesn't make you feel good, I don't know what would.
So, and you chose to say yes to them. You could have said, you know what? I thought about it, but I'm going to go do something else. Let's leave as friends, right?
Mhm.
But you signed a legal document to say, for the income that you're going to pay me, I'm going to do this for you. I'm saying yes to you.
Yeah, and that's where that consequential thinking about deciding, do I jump ship or do I really see this through to steer through rough waters? The way you could look at that employee agreement, that contract that you signed, is a commitment that you're making as an employee to see through all the rough waters, challenging navigation to really make something happen of this great opportunity that you were hired to deliver on. Now that's the happy path. The happy path is, there was this challenge, there was some, there were some struggles. Think about the hero arc, and then you came through and built something that ended up making traction and succeeded and won in the market. But what about the sad path? How does that come through for the interview, the person that you're talking to, where they tried to get budget, they weren't able to do it. They talked to customers, but there was just too much strife internally to actually shift the product to something that they needed.
Well, that's a really complicated answer, and I'll do my best to answer it. But here's the beautiful language from the product community, which is, failure is about learning. And most people will face a time in their career or work for an organization where, if we're going to use the word failure, it could be described as that. And that's a really hard word. Like, failure is a hard word because most organizations will not, like, when I think of failure, because of you, the company, when you leave, the company will not go bankrupt, shut its doors, and cease to exist. I mean, that's kind of
Yeah.
what I think of. It's and there's so much that goes into the success or the challenges of a company, right? First of all, it's important to know, if you're a candidate exiting your company and it hasn't been a win, that you are employable. And your career and who you are does not rise and fall on one period of your long career. So what is 14 months, 28 months of a potentially 25-year-old, maybe more, career,
Hmm. It's
right?
just a drop in the
It's
bucket.
it's a blink. It's a
Yeah.
blink of time. So be encouraged. You will rebound and be working again. And probably somewhere that's going to be a really great experience, because that oftentimes follows a tough one. What's important, however, as a candidate, is to be mindful of a few things if this is your situation. Number one, have the talk track ready of where you, like, the meaning, like the where you added value and what you discovered, so that there's context to everything. And people appreciate transparency, but without disparaging an employer or a set of leaders. People know I won't talk badly about my employer, but because being a candidate is not a natural experience. Sometimes it seeps out in other ways, and you just, it just comes across that, well, you're being a little negative. So we always want to be mindful of, why were you hired? What was the problem you were hired to solve, or the opportunity you were hired to realize? And what did you discover? And where did you try to move the needle? And what were the roadblocks or the headwinds? And be able to very pragmatically break it down to the decision that you ultimately had to make.
Yeah. So when you don't have that story of business success or product success, it becomes a story of perhaps personal success, learning,
That's right.
new conflict tools in your toolbox, and all those kinds of things that would make you a better equipped to handle these situations again in the future.
I remember having a conversation with a product leader who exited a company, and it was not, the big win. And the big lesson they discovered in that experience was that the TAM was very small. It was a PLG business, and it was a small TAM. So even though they achieved and they did the big markers of launching something and acquiring users, and there was growth, the actual ARR and a few other things that would have happened hitting the ARR, that didn't come about. And at the end of the day, a decision was made and they were no longer working there. And so this individual was just really transparent about the situation. They said, now I really understand that when I'm looking at my next opportunity, I will be looking at the TAM and doing more math on, that whole piece of it to determine whether they can get behind the growth objectives that a board has over a business, basically.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
amazing.
I thought
And
that was really interesting.
yeah, yeah, it is. All of these learning experience along the way with successes, with what you would call failures, they lead you to these moments where they give you another lens or filter of perspective on how you want to look at, shape your career.
Yeah. The other piece is, from time to time, we've done a lot of work with companies who hire a product leader to run an innovation lab.
Okay.
So separate from the core product organization. And in talking with product leaders who run innovation labs, or who run a product line that's an innovation lab, that's a whole other level of resilience that I have come to appreciate, because I remember talking with one VP of product who, you would know the name of the company, you would know the employer, fairly high profile, and they had worked there for over 3 years running that product organization of this innovation lab. They hadn't shipped anything. I was like, wow, okay. And was that seen as failure? Not at all. Okay. Because their entire organization was all about running experiments, discovery, like all of that. And that's, they were considered successful. They had a product team, and that was what the job was. Now, interestingly, why were they open? Why were they even talking to me? Because guess what? They're a product person, and the maker beats in their chest. And they wanted to work for a company where they would have the opportunity to ship again. And
Hmm.
so, I found that interesting, really interesting.
Yeah, this innovation lab, especially at a larger organization, might be a lot about what not to build. And so they're innovating and experimenting and discovering, we don't want to go there, we don't want to go there. And it might be very rare for them to actually hit on something that they say, let's go full steam ahead.
That's right.
And they just might not have gotten there in that time period.
And one thing, like if they were to discover that one thing that they do determine, let's build this, like that could be something that makes those 3 years of not shipping anything,
Yeah.
look like, who cares anyways? Look at this one thing.
Yeah. And then it's no longer an innovation lab. It's you now own this product and you're taking it to new heights.
That's right.
This has been so awesome. There's one thing I want you to dive into more, and that's the what's a waste of your time?
My gosh. Okay. What is a waste of my time? I feel like I'm going to have to be very gentle in how I handle this.
Heidi, I think the best thing about you is the fact that you don't need to be gentle and you can just
Okay.
go and let
I can
loose.
just go with it. Okay. So if you're not a product manager, but you want to be one, it's really tough for product recruiters to justify making time to meet with you. It's really hard. And I wish I had time to meet with everyone who wanted a coffee chat or a meet and greet, but it's literally impossible. I can't meet with everyone.
Well, it just doesn't meet the criteria that you say that you go out and look for product people anyways.
Right, right. Here's my thought on folks who are not in product who want to be and what to do, how to think about that. Play to your strengths and think about whatever you have experience in up to this point. Focus on finding an employer who needs you for those reasons. So if, for example, you've been an engineer, look for organizations that are software vendors. So let's say you're an engineer and you've worked for a bank or a manufacturing company or whatever, wherever you've been, look for a product-led business who needs you. Join that organization in whatever way you can deliver value. So if it's in engineering, okay, you join as an engineer, but now you're working for a software company. And chances are that software company has a product organization. So that's your goal. That's the long goal. Your goal then is to be the best engineer they ever hired and do all the things and become indispensable and raise your hand and volunteer to do things and build bridges and have lunch and have the coffee meetings with your pod and your squad and your scrum or whoever, and begin to build relationships with the others who work in that organization in the functions that wrap around engineering. And one day, when you have your performance review or your meeting with your upline, share your dream. My dream is to become a product manager one day. Talk truth to me. What do I need to develop so that you, oh leader of mine, would walk across the room to your colleague, the head of product, and say, I've got someone who you need to hire for your product organization. That is what you're looking for. Because if they give you truth and say, well, I wouldn't recommend you, and here's why. Number one, you don't go the extra mile. I want to see you offer to do something and volunteer and contribute to more than just your job. Because when you're in product, you're going to be so collaborative and cross collaborative. You're going to have to be working in the gray matter, in ambiguity all the time. Number two, your communication skills suck. So product managers have to have great comm skills. I want you to develop that. I want you to do the town halls next month. I want you to work on this and present to our group. I want you to refine how you express yourself. And three, you're always late. Get to work on time or whatever it is, right? So you want that person to help you be better. That's a gift. So that's the path into product, really. For most people, it's through an employer. Because the flip side is you're just digging in your heels and you're only going to take interviews for product jobs, and that's it. So be flexible, add value, think about the long game. It is a long game. Don't be discouraged. Work hard. You'll have to work hard as a PM anyways. And every company wants to be able to say in their employee promoter scores and all the things, we promote from within. So give that employer the opportunity to promote you because you did such a great job and you're worth the promotion into product.
Yeah, that's such a great alignment of a company's intention and objective, and also maybe your aspirations as someone looking to grow your career or pivot into product. To come back to what's a waste of your time, it's people who aren't product people who want to just take your time for a coffee and a chat. No, Heidi has a job to do. She needs to source the best product person for this role that she's paid to fill. And ultimately, someone who wants to become a product person, they need to actually go out go through the process of acquiring those skills, seeking internal promotion to become that person, and ultimately build that foundation that's going to set them up to be a product person and then appeal to people like recruiters like
For
yourself
sure.
in the
Yeah.
future. Yeah.
I want to put a plug in for our resume coaching service, which might be something that someone watching this might be interested in. One of the things that we've discovered as product recruiters, helping companies all across North America make strategic hires, is that product managers are great product managers, and they're not always great resume writers. And
Yeah.
the journey of capturing your narrative and making sure that you are aligned to what a stakeholder is interested in seeing on a resume is a service that we provide. And if you want to learn more information about that, you can visit us at theproductrecruiter.com and click on the resume coaching service, and you'll discover more about what that service is about. It's not for everyone. It is not an AI bot. It is not a resume writing service. You get me as your coach, and together we will level up your narrative to help you compete in a challenging job market for the kinds of roles that you're interested in. So I'll leave that with you to discover on your own at theproductrecruiter.com.
Thanks, Heidi. That's a really great opportunity, and someone would be very foolish to not take that and have the opportunity to work with you in crafting their story as is put down on paper. I want to thank you so much for taking the time, being generous with your time, and going over a bit from what I had asked you, so that we could go over and have this great conversation about product management, that career journey, and how you might be perceived in the market.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, this was really great.